Howdy folks, welcome to FoundFlix. Universal kicks off their rebooted classic monster franchise, The Dark Universe, with the Tom Cruise-led The Mummy. So how does the movie fare, and does it make a good case for the Dark Universe going forward as a whole? The Mummy is most certainly a disappointment, but to be honest, after reading all of the scathing reviews, I didn't hate it quite as much as I thought it would initially. It's got a few elements and scenes that work, but for the most part is a complete mess of different concepts stuck together. When I first heard about Universal's plan to refresh their stable of classic monsters, I was legitimately excited. I love all of those old monster movies. They are classics for a reason, but those are very, very old, and so of course the new incarnations of the creatures wouldn't be exactly the same as the original. Then The Mummy was announced as the first in the Dark Universe series, with Tom Cruise attached to star. And I was like, what? No way Tom Cruise is gonna be in The Mummy. Why would he do that? Money, obviously, but it was still confusing to consider the possibility of Cruise in a $100 million remake of a monster movie. But then the trailer came out and, well, there he was, running away from things as usual, this time a big sandstorm. And it was pretty clear from the trailer that what we'd be getting would be very far removed from anything resembling the original movie, let alone the one with fucking Brendan Fraser, you know? Jeez. As for the movie itself, pretty much all the feelings I formed from the trailer carry over to the movie. It's more or less straight up action with almost no horror to be seen whatsoever. And this to me is the biggest issue I had with the movie. Without it being scary, it doesn't even feel like a Mummy movie. And the movie juggles way too much with its relatively short running time, doing the groundwork of setting up the Dark Universe in addition to the story of the movie itself. The fact the movie starts with Russell Crowe's Dr. Hyde character doling out some monologue about evils in the world, rather than Tom Cruise's character, made that abundantly clear. They're more interested in setting up the big picture of the franchise rather than just making a solid single movie. Later, when Morton meets with Hyde, he introduces us to Prodigium, an organization dedicated to fighting evil around the world. And no doubt Prodigium will act as the shield for the Dark Universe, serving as a starting point for all of the eventual crossovers with other characters. The problem is, even though I know that's the plan, there was nothing interesting about Prodigium and its mission. They are setting up the Dark Universe here because they have to, and we're just supposed to lap it up. But they do it in such a mundane and uninteresting way that it's hard to get excited by the future potential. Part of the issue is that everything throughout the movie moves at such a breakneck pace that nothing really ever registers. It feels very cobbled together, and considering there's 6 credited screenwriters, it makes sense that the movie never quite gels in a cohesive way. And the plot is mostly non-existent, just a vague excuse to push us through scenes. It's about as basic as you can get. Oh, and there's this mystical knife thing missing a jewel they have to track down as well, or whatever. Gotta love those MacGuffins. So we have lots of scenes of people going, we gotta find that jewel. Where's the jewel? And then CG rats or birds or bugs show up, and it's time for another action set piece. The characters aren't any better. Tom Cruise's Nick Morton is more like a hodgepodge of roguish heroes we've already seen than his own character. He's supposed to be a thief with the heart of a hero, but there's no real depth to his character, so he just comes off as kind of a dick. Cruise does his best with the material and is very watchable as usual. But then there's the jokes that not even Cruise can deliver. The one-liners he has here are so clunky and bad. It feels like the screenwriters were playing roguish hero Mad Libs or something, just filling in the blanks. The biggest comedic offender is Morton's sidekick pal played by Jake Johnson, who I don't really have a problem with, but his energy here sticks out like a sore thumb. Jake is pretty much playing himself as usual, barking out jokes in the middle of gunfights, and it never works. It's just annoying. His character dies pretty early in the movie, and I was like, phew, thank God that's over. But then his character returns as a ghost to periodically visit Nick throughout the movie. And these scenes are played for laughs too. And of course, I couldn't help but think of Griffin Dunn's deceased best pal character in American Werewolf in London, but this is just a cheap knockoff. And of course, never comes to the heights of the classic ghost pal dynamic of Werewolf in London. However, I did like Sofia Boutella's Mummy, and to me, she was the real star of the movie. I've been impressed with the physicality she's brought to previous roles in Kingsman and Star Trek Beyond, and she continues that with The Mummy. Though I definitely prefer the more ragged, traditional looking Mummy that Amonette starts as. It was more akin to the classic look of the character and was, pretty good. Then when she's fully regenerated and looks more like she's wearing a sexy mummy costume you'd buy at Spirit, I was like, that's not even a mummy anymore. She's like 2% covered in bandages. Too bad her character is also shortchanged by the script, as in the end it becomes more about finishing Morton's story than Amonette's. Alright, spoiler time! I actually joked that they should have made Tom Cruise the Mummy from the beginning. Can you imagine if it was the same basic thing as this movie, but Tommy in a loincloth being all ridiculous and shooting sand at people? Everyone would see the trailer and be like, what the fuck is that? It looks so insane, I have to see it. So in my version, in the end, our heroine would sacrifice herself to stop mummy crews, but as a result, she herself becomes cursed. So she could be the new mummy in future installments. That's why I was endlessly amused that the ending of the actual movie was shockingly close to my stupid idea. Morton sacrifices himself to stop Amunet releasing Set and proving himself to have a good heart. He stops her ritual, but by stabbing himself with the blade, Morton becomes cursed with the mummy's powers. But it's just weird to end things this way. So Amunet is just gone now? Or do we have to spend 20 minutes in an upcoming installment for her to get brought back again? Now, they probably shouldn't have done my idea because it is admittedly dumb, but there had to be a better way to leave things with the story than what we got. As I mentioned, there were a few highlights mainly amongst the action scenes. The plane crash scene where birds fly into and destroy their engines is an exciting and well done scene. Apparently they were in a real plane to shoot this scene, tumbling around in the air and fighting against gravity. And it does look good on screen, but it's still generic, not tailored to something specifically related to the mummy. This could have been in any movie, and we saw a similar sequence back in Dark Knight Rises. Though that scene was 1,000 times better, and again was actually our villain causing the chaos, whereas here it's just some CG birds that take the plane down. But a few decent action scenes isn't enough to outweigh the bad, which is pretty much everything else. I really wish they would have evoked the suspense of the classic Universal monster movies rather than completely focusing on an action-adventure take. It just doesn't feel enough like what one would want from a movie called The Mummy in its current incarnation. It's far too generic to really ever become its own thing, and the universe building aspect really detracts from making the movie itself feel strong enough to stand on its own. So obviously The Mummy is a disappointment. The critics have ripped it apart, and it's looking at a pretty low domestic weekend take at the box office. Where does the dark universe go from here? Has it been stopped once again, looking at you Dracula Untold, before it really even got a chance to start? Well, even if the movie isn't doing well in the US, it's doing pretty huge business worldwide, so it appears that thanks to robust international business, the Dark Universe has bought itself a bit more time. But despite the ending keeping Morton's character involved in the story, Crowe's only had a contract for one film, so chances are he won't be back in any real capacity. We know they intend on making new movies based on pretty much every classic Universal monsters, and recently they added 2 more with Hunchback of Notre Dame and Phantom of the Opera as well. But first up is Bride of Frankenstein heading to theaters in 2019. Javier Bardem has already been cast as Frankenstein's monster, but no one has been locked down for the titular bride as of yet. Universal has recently said they've been trying to get Angelina Jolie on board, which actually could work. But even if they have a good cast, we don't know how the movie will turn out at all. Universal bet big on Tom Cruise for The Mummy, but just because there's a pedigree actor's face on the poster, that doesn't make it a good movie. I hope they make Bride of Frankenstein a darker R-rated gothic romance that actually tries to be more like a suspense film rather than ending up like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but with Frankensteins instead of Brad Pitt. All right, that'll wrap it up for my review of Tom Cruise versus The Mummy. What did you guys think of the movie? Are you still excited by what the Dark Universe will have in store with further chapters? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching FoundFlix. See you next time.